Welcome to What the Plus, a Disney Plus podcast. I'm Garrett Martin, and I'm doing something a little different this week. I had a regular episode all ready to go, but considering the week this has been with the election, the endless nights, watching Georgia and Pennsylvania's vote totals slowly change, and all the stress of the whole situation, it just didn't seem like the best time for a couple of middle-aged guys to talk about a 40-year-old Saturday morning cartoon. So the next official episode will be out next Thursday with Henry Gilbert of the Talking Simpsons podcast coming on to look back at the 1981 cartoon Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. So if all you care about is the Disney Plus chatter, go ahead and exit out of this right now and just come back on Thursday. Now, the thing is, I know how it looks when a new podcast just randomly skips a week unannounced. I don't want anyone to think that I'm fading away or burning out or losing interest here or anything. So instead of leaving this week empty, here's a short digression on a topic that isn't exactly about Disney Plus, but that's still 100% Disney. I'm talking about a recent trip I took to Disney World in Orlando last week during a pandemic that was breaking all records for new cases. Look, I booked this thing like 6 weeks in advance. It's not like the COVID situation was all that rosy back in the middle of September, but had I known how much worse it was going to get in October, I probably wouldn't have risked it. But once that money is spent, I gotta go, you know? For 7 months, I was as cautious as anybody could be. I didn't eat at a restaurant once between March 11th and October 11th. We get most of our groceries delivered still. If I have to leave the house, I always have a mask on and sometimes two. So my decision to go back to Disney World wasn't made lightly. I've read so many on-the-ground reports about how the park's COVID precautions are going, watched videos, listened to podcasts, and although there's obviously still risk in any situation involving groups of people during the pandemic, what I've read about the parks made me feel just comfortable enough to test it out for myself. So in September, I booked a couple of nights at the Caribbean Beach Resort, and last week I made the drive from Atlanta to Orlando. Yeah, there's no way still that I'm going to get on a plane. And surprisingly, once I was there, I was more comfortable at the parks and the resort than I thought I would be. Some of my biggest concerns I had was with mask wearing in the parks. You know, this weird idea that's popular among large parts of America that masks aren't important. Now, my drive down confirmed that for many people, this pandemic apparently just doesn't seem to exist. I limited my stops on the drive down, but I still had to get gas and use the bathroom and get lunch. And I saw too many people at too many gas stations who weren't wearing any facial coverings at all, including employees. It made no sense. Once a woman and her mom asked me if Georgia was a state where they had to wear masks before they walked into a gas station. And I was like, I mean, I don't know if you have to, but you should. So yes, such a weird question to ask. I don't know why people aren't taking this seriously. Fortunately, that attitude doesn't fly at the theme parks. I spent 2 days at the parks, one at the Magic Kingdom, one at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and mask compliance was almost universal at both. There were a small handful of people I saw at the Magic Kingdom who'd maybe have the mask below their nose, but twice I saw a cast member ask someone to pull their mask up above their nose, and both parks had employees who'd regularly walk around holding signs reminding guests to wear masks and to wear them properly. I did develop a weird personal vendetta with this one family I saw at Hollywood Studios who just totally drove me nuts. I saw them repeatedly throughout the day, and neither the mom nor her 3 preteen sons were ever wearing their masks properly. Sometimes their masks were completely off while they were walking around, eating and drinking something, which you're not supposed to do. If you're eating or drinking at these parks, you have to be stationary and you have to be away from other people. Sometimes they just have their mask below their nose. I have, like I said, just a total burning hatred for these strangers. They seem like the stereotypical suburban family who feel super entitled, like the rules just don't apply to them. Thankfully, they never were all that close to me. Even though I saw them throughout the day, they were always at a distance. And again, they were the only people on either park on either day who I saw repeatedly flouting the mask rules. Other than that one family, everybody else I saw at the parks took the mask rule seriously. Of course, there weren't a lot of people there. I mean, there were a lot of people, but compared to what you normally see at these places when we're not in a pandemic, it was basically empty. I mean, even with me expecting a much smaller crowd, I was surprised at how empty the parks were. Or at least the Magic Kingdom. I mean, Hollywood Studios, it was clearly not as busy as it normally would be when we weren't in a pandemic, but it felt busier than the Magic Kingdom, maybe just because it's a smaller park. But also, this is where all the most recent additions to Disney World are. I mean, with Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge, and the new Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and Toy Story Land, all the hot new rides at the entire resort are in this one park. So, I mean, that's why I decided to make it one of the two I visited. So obviously, it's going to have a lot more interest in it, I believe, than Epcot or Animal Kingdom might at this point. It is also physically a smaller park, so there's just less room for a crowd to spread out. Now, the longest line I waited in at the Magic Kingdom was for the chicken and waffle sandwich at Sleepy Hollow. Took probably a half hour. When it came to rides, Splash Mountain was the longest, about a 20-minute wait. And that's partially because they actually had to stop the ride for a few minutes while I was in line. No other ride took more than 10 or 15 minutes to get through the queue. Now, I didn't try to ride the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which is always the longest line in Magic Kingdom. But even with other rides that usually have long waits, like Peter Pan's Flight or Big Thunder or the Haunted Mansion, the lines took only as long as it did to physically walk through them. Again, I was there on a Wednesday in the morning during a school week, during a pandemic, and lines definitely grew longer throughout the day. When I walked back by the Haunted Mansion in the afternoon, the queue was really backed up. I mean, it was the week of Halloween. Obviously, everyone wanted to ride the spooky ride. Still, from a waiting perspective, it felt like an entirely different decade at the Magic Kingdom, like I was back there in the 80s or something. The lines were longer at Hollywood Studios, where there's less to do, and much of it is new. Even at Rope Drop, the wait for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railroad was close to an hour. Granted, this ride opened the week before the pandemic started, so it's still brand new to almost anyone who's going to be going here. You had very few opportunities to ride it before the parks closed in March. I waited maybe 30 minutes for the Rock and Roller Coaster at Hollywood Studios. I didn't even try the Tower of Terror or Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run because those rides just seem inherently less safe from a COVID perspective. You're sitting in a small enclosed space with other people. I was able to snag a boarding pass for Rise of the Resistance, but I had my phone in my hand and the app ready to go a few minutes before 10 a.m. struck. Everyone was ready to grab them, and they lasted for mere seconds before all were claimed. So if you do want to go to Hollywood Studios and you do want to ride the new Star Wars ride, you better be prepared to act fast. While riding Rise and going through its elaborate pre-show, there were moments that gave me pause, where I felt a little less comfortable than I did elsewhere in the parks. They distanced guests out in the interrogation room scene and aboard the transport shuttle. But in both cases, again, I'm still in a small enclosed area with between 6 and 12 other people. They're all wearing masks, but I don't know these people. I don't know their lives. I don't know how seriously they take this outside of Disney World. Maybe they don't wear masks anywhere. Who knows? I'm not sure what the solution should be for that ride, though. It's still new, so most guests haven't really experienced it, and all those pre-show moments are absolutely crucial to what makes the ride so special. I'm not sure how the ride would feel if you had guests just walk through those scenes without stopping. That's actually how they handle the Haunted Mansion. You'll just cut right through the stretching room, no pre-show. You'll get right onto the Omnimover. You miss the ghost host speech and all that. I mean, as a absolute fan of Haunted Mansion, I missed all of those elements, but I've also ridden that one probably 100 times or more in my life, so I can, handle not having some of that stuff happen once in a while. Rise of the Resistance, though, I mean, that's brand new, and it would be a noticeably inferior show without the full sequence of events. They did install plexiglass partitions in some of the pre-show areas. There's a plexiglass divider between the front and back seats of the ride vehicle. Most rides I rode at the parks had ample space between riders, with, say, only the first and last rows being filled on Pirates or Splash Mountain, with 2 empty cars between every occupied car on the roller coasters. But with the high demand for rides, of the resistance, and the lack of a guarantee that you'll even be able to get a boarding pass for it, even with the limited capacity during the pandemic, Disney seems reluctant to reduce capacity on that ride any more than it already is, which makes it feel less safe than other parts of the parks. I would have felt safer if I had been in a vehicle by myself. The plexiglass didn't really make me any more comfortable. But again, these are all thoughts I had after the fact. Like during the ride, I was totally swept up in this epic adventure, and I wasn't really thinking about this during it. Now, the Aerosmith coaster did blow my masks off my left ear. Fortunately, I was able to really quickly grab them before they flew off my right ear and hold them in place for the rest of the ride. So yes, loving an elevator might rock your mask off. Just a warning. I took specific precautions that I didn't necessarily need to take. I never used a resort bus once. I drove down, so I drove my own car to the parks both mornings. I never got on the monorail. I took the ferry to the Magic Kingdom, and the ferry, it's larger, it's open air, and they had markers on the ground to keep guests several feet away from each other. I only ate indoors once in an almost completely empty Pizza Rizzo. Otherwise, I always sat outdoors or took food back to my room. Mobile ordering is enforced almost everywhere, and since you already have the Disney app on your phone anyway, it's not in any way annoying to use mobile ordering. It's a very quick and convenient process. Now, mask compliance wasn't quite as universal at my hotel, the Caribbean Beach Hotel. You don't have to wear masks while swimming, and some people would seemingly forget to put them back on after leaving the pool area. Again, though, those situations were rare. I did see employees sometimes remind people to put masks on, and the resort is sprawling enough where I never had a problem finding an outdoor seat with nobody else within 30 or so feet of it. I did have a drink inside the Abracadabra bar, but again, other than the bartenders who all wore masks, it was basically empty, and when more people showed up, I finished my drink and made my exit. And the Skyliner, with its natural ventilation and the fact that you generally will just ride it one party to a car already, is kind of the ideal transportation for a pandemic. So I, as a huge Skyliner lover, I rode that thing as much as I could. It's been over a week now since I left Disney World. I've shown no symptoms. I haven't been tested because I haven't felt anything. I've basically been quarantining. Of course, I'm still within the incubation period for another week, so I know I'm not out of it. I might have caught something. I had 2 masks on everywhere I went, and I ate all but one of my meals in my room or on an otherwise empty patio, so I'm feeling optimistic. But again, until it's been 14 days, I won't know for sure that I didn't catch anything there. Still, I was surprised at how comfortable I felt there. I never worried that much. It was impossible to not occasionally walk within 6 feet of others, but those are always fleeting moments, maybe a second or two of being near each other while walking through the park, and always with people who are wearing masks. Now, I'm not sure if I'd go back during the pandemic, even if I don't wind up catching anything. Being in the parks and on resort had that instant sense of calm that it usually does for me. I go to these places all the time when there's not a pandemic. I mean, I was at Disney World the week before everything shut down back in March. I probably would have been there once a month since then if it had been open and not in a pandemic. And despite the crowds and the heat and all the things that can make a theme park in Orlando uncomfortable, I'm still always absolutely charmed when I'm there. Like a peace just overtakes me, and I forget about everything that's stressing me out, whether it's work, life, an election, or anything else. It's an escape from reality, sure, but sometimes you need one, and I still felt that last week, despite the masks and the pandemic. It wasn't completely the same, though. I avoided anything that would have me sitting still indoors with others for more than a few minutes, so I had to skip out on some of my favorite things to do there, like the Enchanted Tiki Room and the Country Bears Jamboree. It was always fraught going into a store. Distancing tended to break down inside them, even with masks on. I didn't necessarily like when a stranger would get right in my personal space because they wanted to look at the same item I was looking at. There's still some entertainment in the park, like Halloween floats with Nightmare Before Christmas characters, or Mickey Mouse and his friends in costume. They would appear around the Magic Kingdom throughout the day. The Cadaver Dans would circle the main hub on a streetcar singing Halloween-themed barbershop songs. As pleasant as those were, they only served to underscore the problems the parks are facing. Seeing a single float with 3 socially distanced characters on it just highlights the lack of an actual parade and the total lack of character meet and greets. It was also disappointing for the parks to close as early as they did. When I was there, the Magic Kingdom closed at 6 p.m. It wasn't even getting dark yet. Even though I was able to enjoy the atmosphere of the parks and the rides that I went on, it was still impossible to not think about all the employees who have been laid off, or how Disney execs have restored their full compensation before conducting mass layoffs. The Magic Kingdom is, I'll be honest, it's a bittersweet place right now, and not just because of the masks and the plexiglass and the social distancing, and not just because of the number of attractions that are currently closed, like the People Mover, or the Steamboat, or the Railroad, and not just because it's still as expensive as it always is, despite having less to do and less time in which to do it. Visiting the Magic Kingdom today gives me mixed emotions because of the deplorable way this company treats its employees. The remaining cast members were as joyful and gracious as ever, but almost every interaction with one made me think about the ones who just lost their job, about their friends and coworkers who are now out of work during a pandemic and in a state with widespread, prolonged problems processing unemployment benefits. I mean, there's an inherent charm to the Magic Kingdom and Disney World's other theme parks that's almost impossible to dispel. I felt many moments of joy and excitement and serenity at Disney World last week. I felt safe enough that I'm open to going back during the pandemic, assuming I don't still get sick from this trip and once the parks return to longer hours. I don't know if I would do it, but I'm not dead set against it. But as undeniable as the company's struggles have been during the pandemic, it's still negligent to talk about these theme parks today without pointing out how the company treats its employees, while again restoring the ample compensation packages bestowed upon its executive suite. Disney World might be the happiest place on earth when I can shut my brain down for a moment and just exult in it, but it's also an incredibly visible monument to inequality in a country that's absolutely lousy with it. But hey, that's just me. If your conscience is unburdened by such thoughts and you aren't entirely stressed out by being in the proximity of mask-wearing crowds, you might enjoy a trip to Disney World even during a pandemic. Okay, thanks again. I think that's going to wrap this up. Thanks for listening to this special episode of What the Plus, a Disney Plus podcast. I'm Garrett Martin. We'll be back next week, as I said, with a normal episode. Henry Gilbert of Talking Simpsons, talking about Spider-Man and his amazing friends. Until then, stay safe. And hey, I'm real proud of you, Georgia. Way to go.